Hello, and welcome to Sleepy Scientist. I'm glad you're here. Whether you've had a long day, a busy mind, or you simply love falling asleep to the sound of science. Tonight, we'll be diving into a truly magical world, a world where geometry isn't just a set of rules on a chalkboard, but a living, breathing art form. Imagine, if you will, a soft hum in the air. It's a sound that carries with it a sense of purpose, a quiet rhythm, a kind of dance. In the distance you spot them, the bees. They flit from flower to flower, their tiny wings carrying them with purpose. But beneath that delicate buzz, these little creatures are constructing something extraordinary, perfect hexagons, rows upon rows, stretching across the hive. Each cell a piece of an intricate puzzle, fits together with precision that rivals the finest human architecture. Now pause for a moment and picture this. Each honeycomb cell is just the right size, just the right shape, designed not only to hold honey, but to fit perfectly within its neighbors. This level of design isn't accidental. It's the result of a combination of natural instincts, mathematical principles, and generations of evolution. It's geometry at its finest, a testament to nature's ability to craft with flawless precision. So how do bees, with their small size and simple brains, pull this off? Tonight we'll uncover the deep secrets behind how bees use geometry to create their perfect hives. Feel free to share where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a quiet joy to know how far and wide this sleepy community stretches. If you enjoy these sleepy explorations, I'd be so grateful if you gave this video a little like and tapped that subscribe button. It helps more sleepy scientists like you find their way here, and it means I can keep making more of these journeys for you now. Let's settle in and dive deeper into this tiny world of mathematical wonder, where even the smallest creatures can teach us about precision, efficiency, and design. So what is it that makes a beehive so special? When you think of a bee, you probably picture its busy flight, its rapid zigzagging movements. But when you stop to observe the hive itself, something remarkable catches your eye: the precision with which these tiny creatures have constructed their home. It's a structure of perfect hexagons, each one nestled against the other, like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that has been expertly assembled. And here's the kicker: it's not just beautiful, it's incredibly efficient. You might be wondering, why hexagons? After all, there are many shapes in the world. Why does nature settle on this six-sided form? It turns out that hexagons are the most efficient shape when it comes to maximizing space and minimizing the amount of material needed to construct it. Think of it this way: if you were to pack a box full of items, you'd want to use the least amount of space while still keeping everything secure. In the world of bees, wax is precious. They can't afford to waste it, so they need to design a structure that holds as much honey as possible without sacrificing strength. Hexagons fit together perfectly with no gaps between them, creating a densely packed grid that fills every available space. And it's not just a random choice. The geometry of the hexagon allows bees to use the least amount of wax to create the most storage space. It's a remarkable combination of natural instinct and mathematical efficiency. But bees don't just stumble upon this design by accident. They've been honing their craft for millions of years, passing down their knowledge from one generation to the next. This brings us to an interesting question: how do bees know how to build in such perfect geometric patterns? After all, they don't have the complex brains that humans do. They're not sitting down with protractors and compasses to plan out their hive. Instead, their remarkable ability to build these geometric masterpieces comes down to simple behaviors, social interactions, and an intrinsic understanding of their environment. It's as if each bee has an inbuilt blueprint for construction that guides its every move. But how exactly does this process unfold? Perhaps it's the way bees communicate with one another through dances, sharing information about the location of nectar and how to build. Maybe it's the way they instinctively sense the temperature and humidity, adjusting their behavior accordingly. Or maybe it's something even more fascinating, something hidden beneath the surface, a deeper understanding of the world that we have yet to fully comprehend. It's a mystery that we can explore together. How do these tiny creatures, without a single spoken word, build something so geometrically perfect? How do they use geometry, not just as a tool, but as the language that binds their entire community together? This is the essence of what we'll uncover tonight. How bees, in their quiet, industrious way, harness the power of geometry to craft a home that is not only functional, but a work of art in its own right. Now that we've set the stage for the remarkable architecture of beehives, let's take a closer look at why geometry is so crucial to their survival. Imagine for a moment being a bee, small, fragile, but with an instinctual understanding of design. You're not just building a home for yourself, you're creating a sustainable environment for an entire colony. The hive is a living organism, in itself, a place of birth, death, and most importantly, nourishment. Every part of the hive, from the hexagonal cells to the very structure of the walls, is optimized for the survival of the colony. Let's dive into the first and most obvious reason geometry is so important: efficiency. Bees, like any other creatures, need to conserve their resources. Honey, which they gather from the nectar of flowers, is their primary source of energy, and it's not something they can afford to waste. Their survival depends on how well they can store and preserve their food supply. In a world where every drop of nectar counts, there's no room for inefficiency. When bees choose the hexagonal shape for their honeycomb cells, they are in essence choosing the most space-efficient option. Hexagons are the most mathematically efficient way to pack equal-sized units together without wasting any space. Think of it like a perfectly stacked stack of pancakes. Every single pancake fits snugly into the space between the others, with no empty spots left. Other shapes, like squares or triangles, would leave gaps, resulting in wasted space and consequently wasted resources. The hexagonal design allows bees to store the maximum amount of honey with the least amount of wax. But it's not just about the storage space. These hexagonal cells are incredibly strong for their size. Wax, although lightweight, has remarkable structural strength when arranged in this shape. It's no accident that the honeycomb's geometry mimics the strength and stability of natural crystalline formations. This hexagonal arrangement gives the cells a solid, compact structure that can withstand the pressure of hundreds or even thousands of bees constantly moving about, coming and going, without collapsing or breaking under the weight of the honey stored inside. As you imagine the tiny bees buzzing around, busy with their tasks, ask yourself, how do they instinctively know that the hexagon is the best choice? Surely they don't study geometry the way we do. They don't attend school or read textbooks on mathematical theory. The answer lies in the magic of evolution. Over millions of years, bees have developed the most efficient and stable system of honey storage through trial and error, passing down this knowledge through generations. The ones who built their hives with the most efficient geometry survived longer, producing healthier colonies. Those that didn't, well, they didn't make it. And this brings us to an interesting thought. Could bees be more mathematically gifted than we give them credit for? It's easy to think of bees as simple creatures driven only by instinct. But what if they have an innate understanding of geometry, passed down through the generations, embedded deep within their DNA? What if this understanding isn't learned, but hardwired, a natural part of their biology that allows them to build these perfect structures without consciously thinking about it? When you watch a bee create a honeycomb cell, it appears as though the bee is following an invisible blueprint. The cell emerges gradually, cell by cell, and in a dance of synchronized motion, the bees work together, their tiny bodies moving in harmony to create something that is both practical and awe-inspiring. Their collective behavior is guided by this invisible geometry, whether it's the angle at which they hold their legs to mold the wax, or the specific positioning of their movements to ensure every cell fits perfectly with its neighbor. This brings us to another aspect of beehive geometry that is even more extraordinary. It's not just the shape of the honeycomb that is important, but the way the cells are arranged. The bees' collective behavior ensures that every cell is perfectly aligned, and the way they work together in unison allows for this intricate design to unfold almost effortlessly. It's as though there's a hidden collective intelligence, an understanding of geometry that transcends individual knowledge. But how is this possible? Scientists have observed that the bees are not merely following an individual blueprint, they're responding to environmental cues such as temperature, humidity, and the state of the hive. These factors guide the bees' behaviors in subtle ways, allowing them to adjust their work to the ever-changing needs of the colony. For instance, when bees are creating new comb, they might adjust the size of the cells slightly based on the type of brood young bees they are raising, or the quantity of honey they plan to store. Now picture the hive in its full glory, a complex self-regulating structure that hums with life and efficiency. It's a living machine made of wax with thousands of tiny, perfect hexagons, each one serving a specific function. The beauty of this design is that it's not rigid, it's dynamic, evolving, adapting to the needs of the colony. As the seasons change, the hive will adapt its geometry, perhaps expanding to accommodate more honey storage or contracting to provide warmth and protection during colder months. Isn't it amazing that something so small, something so simple as a tiny bee, could be part of such a vast and intricate web of life driven by these elegant and efficient geometric principles? These little architects don't just create for the sake of creating. They build with purpose, with foresight, and with an uncanny understanding of the geometry of life itself. Now imagine yourself as one of those bees diligently working to complete the next honeycomb cell. The feeling of wax between your tiny legs, the subtle vibration in the air as your fellow bees communicate around you, it's all part of the grand design. But why is the hexagonal shape so consistently favored by bees? To understand this, let's dive into the science behind the honeycomb structure and why, in nature's quiet wisdom, the hexagon emerges as the perfect shape for the task at hand. Hexagons are not just an aesthetically pleasing shape, they are a product of mathematical efficiency. Let's think about it from a mathematical perspective. When you try to fit regular shapes together to cover a flat surface, you'll notice that the hexagon is the only shape that perfectly fills the space without leaving any gaps. Unlike squares, which leave small triangular gaps, when tiled, hexagons fit together seamlessly. The bees, it turns out, have instinctively chosen the shape that minimizes the amount of wax they need to use while maximizing storage space. But what about the strength of the hexagonal structure? Wax, while lightweight and strong for its size, is still a delicate material. How does it manage to withstand the daily weight and pressure exerted by hundreds of bees, all the while keeping the honey sealed tightly within its cells? The key lies in the geometry. Hexagons, unlike circles or squares, distribute stress evenly throughout the structure. This means that when pressure is applied, whether from the bees inside the hive or from external forces like wind or predators, the force is spread across multiple points, preventing any one area from buckling or collapsing. Now let's step back and consider a fascinating fact. The hexagonal shape emerges from the very behavior of the bees themselves. Researchers have discovered that bees don't consciously decide to create hexagons. They don't have a plan in mind, no blueprints to follow. Instead, this perfect geometry arises naturally as a result of simple behavioral patterns. Bees begin with circular shapes when they first start forming a cell, but over time, the walls of these circles naturally start to pull together into hexagonal shapes. The reason this happens is due to the way wax behaves when heated by the bee's body temperature. As the bees work, the wax softens, and the walls of the cells naturally conform into the most efficient shape. The action is almost like a dance, where each bee contributes its small part to an unfolding masterpiece. You might be asking yourself now, how can something as tiny as a bee have the power to create such intricate geometric designs without the conscious thought we associate with planning? The answer lies in the realm of collective behavior. In a bee colony, each individual has a limited yet essential role to play. Bees don't work alone. They communicate constantly, sharing information through dances, pheromones, and touch. Each bee is contributing to a larger goal, and it's through this collective effort that they arrive at the most optimal solution. For example, when bees are building the hive, they rely on a process called self-organization. This means that each bee responds to local conditions and information from its environment without needing a central leader to direct the effort. As they work together, their individual actions create a pattern, something that no single bee could achieve on its own. It's a collective intelligence at play, where the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. Imagine being a part of that collective. Every action you take is small, but together with your colony, you're building something far beyond the sum of individual efforts. It's a bit like how your own body works. Each cell in your body performs its task independently, but together, they create a living organism. Similarly, the bees work as individual agents, but they cooperate in ways that result in one of the most perfect, mathematically efficient structures in nature. Now let's pause and reflect for a moment. Have you ever wondered how the bees know where to place each new cell within the hive? After all, they must not only fit the honeycomb cells together perfectly, but also arrange them in such a way that they optimize both the storage of honey and the rearing of young bees. The answer lies in the bees' inherent ability to sense their environment. They are acutely aware of the temperature, humidity, and even the vibrations within the hive. By using this sensory information, the bees ensure that the structure they're building remains balanced and stable, even as the conditions inside the hive change. It's incredible to think that bees without any formal education, without any intellectual reasoning, can still build something that even human architects might admire. And yet this is exactly what they do. It's as though they are born with an instinctual blueprint for the most efficient structure in nature. The hexagonal cells are just one part of a much larger, intricately woven design that sustains the hive, keeps it protected from the outside world, and ensures the survival of the colony. As you lie there drifting deeper into this world of wonder, you might wonder, what else could we learn from these tiny, tireless architects? If geometry is so deeply embedded in the very fabric of their existence, might there be lessons we can apply to our own lives? Perhaps in the way we approach efficiency, or the way we work together to create something greater than ourselves. Bees don't question their instincts, and perhaps that's something we too could learn to embrace in our own lives. The simplicity of the honeycomb's geometry is its genius. The bees may not understand calculus, but they understand balance, efficiency, and how to work together to achieve something extraordinary. And when you look at the hive, it's clear this geometry is the result of something far deeper than luck. It's the result of millions of years of evolution, fine-tuning every angle, every cell, every movement, until perfection emerged. So here you are nestled in the warmth of your bed, listening to the rhythmic hum of bee wings, and the subtle sound of wax being molded into geometric perfection. By now, you've learned how geometry plays a crucial role in the design of the hive, how hexagons are the bee's best tool for efficiency, strength, and survival. But let's pause for a moment and consider the even deeper wonder. How do these tiny insects with their tiny brains manage to be such brilliant architects? What exactly makes them capable of pulling off such complex tasks with no blueprint, no education, no formal training? The answer lies in something we all share: instincts. Bees may not have the large, complex brains of humans, but what they do have is an incredibly sophisticated system of behavioral cues and sensory feedback mechanisms that guide them in their work. In other words, bees are born knowing how to build a hive. They don't need to learn it the way we do. And while their brains are small, their instincts are honed by millions of years of evolution to ensure the survival of the colony. This ability to construct the perfect hive comes from the gradual development of behaviors passed down through generations. But let's not stop there. Let's look deeper into the biology of the bee and how it functions as a collective unit. The hive itself isn't just a pile of wax cells. It's a living, breathing organism. Each bee has a role to play, and their actions, though individual, contribute to a larger, beautifully coordinated effort. The magic lies in the way bees communicate and work together as a collective. Even though each bee may be physically tiny and seemingly insignificant on its own, it's part of a grand unified system. When they work together, they can accomplish extraordinary things. Let's focus for a moment on the biology of bees and how it shapes their behavior. Inside the hive, every bee performs a specific task based on its role in the colony worker drone or queen. The worker bees, who are the architects and the ones building the hive, possess an extraordinary level of coordination. They use pheromones, subtle chemical signals, to communicate with one another. These scents allow them to convey information about the location of nectar, the state of the hive, and even how the building process should unfold. The bees don't just know what to do. They receive cues from their environment and from their fellow bees, allowing them to adjust their actions accordingly. It's almost as if the hive itself has a form of collective intelligence, a kind of superorganism where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Each individual bee acts according to its instincts and the information it receives from the hive, contributing to the larger process without needing to think in the way humans do. Instead of individual plans and conscious decisions, the bees act based on their shared knowledge, driven by generations of experience and biological programming. And then there's the question of how bees build in such perfect harmony. When you look at the hive from a distance, it's easy to see the perfect symmetry and balance. But how do they manage to build such a precise structure with no rulers or measuring tools? Once again, the answer lies in simple, instinctual behaviors. Worker bees use their bodies as measuring tools, judging the size and shape of the cells with incredible precision. They don't use complex mathematics, but their bodies and movements are naturally tuned to build the perfect cell. When a worker bee begins to form a new cell, it starts by creating a circular base. As it moves, the cell gradually morphs into a hexagon as the soft wax warms and reshapes in response to the surrounding cells. This process is highly adaptive. If a bee finds that a certain section of the hive needs to be reinforced, or if the temperature or humidity in the hive changes, the bees will instinctively adjust their work. Their precision is remarkable, even more so when you consider that it's all happening without the need for direct communication or conscious decision-making. It's not that the bees know how to build the perfect honeycomb, it's that they are biologically programmed to work together in a way that results in the most efficient and stable structure for the colony's needs. And that leads us to another question. What if we could tap into this collective intelligence in our own lives? What if, instead of always relying on individual plans and isolated efforts, we embrace the power of community and collective action? The bees show us that when we work together, guided by instinct and a shared sense of purpose, the results can be more powerful than any single individual could achieve. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? While the bees are at work, the hive is alive with motion. Worker bees buzz from one cell to the next, constantly adjusting their work, contributing to the whole. Each bee moves with a specific purpose, whether it's building a new cell, collecting nectar, or feeding the queen. And as they work, the hive begins to grow. The walls fill with hexagonal cells that store not only honey, but also pollen and the young larvae of the next generation. It's a beautiful cycle of life, made possible by geometry instinct and the power of collective work. At this point, you might find yourself asking, how does it all come together? How do these seemingly small, simple creatures coordinate such a massive, complex project? The answer is both simpler and more profound than you might expect. The bees' success lies in their ability to trust the process. Their instinctual understanding of the natural world, passed down over millennia, guides them to the perfect solution without them ever having to think about it in the way humans do. In the end, the creation of the hive is a masterpiece not of individual brilliance, but of collective wisdom, a lesson in the power of working together and trusting the geometry that nature has set before us. It's the kind of lesson that stays with you long after the last bee has buzzed away and the hive is complete. When we look at the bees, we're not just seeing their ability to build a perfect honeycomb, we're witnessing the power of instinct cooperation and a quiet, unspoken understanding of the world around us. As you imagine the bees busily tending to their hive, their tiny bodies moving with perfect coordination, let's step back and zoom out a bit. We've explored how geometry plays a fundamental role in the hive's design, and we've discussed the instincts and collective intelligence of the bees that guide them in their task. But let's ask a deeper, even more fascinating question. What would happen if these intricate geometric principles were absent from the hive? We've seen that the hexagonal cells are not only efficient in terms of space and wax usage, but they're also incredibly strong, able to withstand the weight and movement of thousands of bees. But what happens when nature strays from the geometric ideal? Can bees ever make mistakes in their construction? And if they do, how does it affect the colony? Believe it or not, bees are not perfect builders all the time. Though their instincts are finely tuned, environmental factors, the age of the bees, and even external disturbances can influence the geometry of the hive. In fact, researchers have observed that if a bee colony is under stress due to overcrowding, lack of resources, or changes in temperature, the bees sometimes abandon their usual commitment to perfect hexagons. In these cases, the bees might resort to irregular shapes, which are less efficient and less stable. For instance, when a bee colony is in a rush, perhaps trying to rebuild after a move, or during an early season bloom, when nectar is abundant, bees have been known to create some non-hexagonal shapes, triangles, or in some rare cases, squares. These irregular shapes may still serve a purpose in storing honey or rearing brood, but they're not as structurally sound or efficient as the perfect hexagon. This shift away from the ideal shape can have cascading effects on the colony. If cells are too large or irregular, they may collapse under the weight of the honey stored inside. If cells are too small, they won't hold enough honey to sustain the colony during the winter months. And if the bees create an irregular structure, the colony may struggle with ventilation, heating, and protecting the brood, the developing young bees. So while the hexagonal design is generally a marvel of efficiency and strength, there are moments when even bees can falter, showing that no system is entirely foolproof. But here's the silver lining: even when the bees make these less than perfect shapes, they quickly adapt. The hive is a constantly evolving structure, and the bees are quick to notice when something isn't quite right. If the hexagons become distorted, they'll modify the shape of the wax cells, working in small groups to bring things back into alignment. It's almost as though the bees have a built-in feedback loop, a system of checks and balances that ensures that the overall integrity of the hive is maintained even when things go awry. You might be wondering, why doesn't nature simply give bees the perfect blueprint for building their hives so they never make mistakes? Well, nature is far more interested in resilience than perfection. Evolution doesn't give creatures an unchanging set of instructions. It gives them the ability to adapt. In fact, bees' ability to adapt and repair their hives is one of the keys to their survival. A perfect hive is not one that never faces challenges, but one that can endure and overcome them. As you picture the bees in your mind's eye repairing the small imperfections in their hive, think about how the hive might mirror life itself. There are lessons in these small imperfections. Much like the bees, we often build our own hives, structures of our own lives that we tend to and care for. And just like the bees, we face times when things don't go according to plan. We may build something with the best of intentions, only to find that we've made mistakes, faced setbacks, or strayed from our path. But like the bees, we too have the ability to adapt, to recalibrate, and to rebuild. The bee colony's ability to fix its mistakes speaks to a kind of resilience that we can draw from in our own lives. Perfection is not the goal, it's the ability to persist, adapt, and continue growing. The hive, with all its beauty and functionality, is a dynamic system. It's not a stagnant structure. It's a living, breathing entity that reflects the ongoing process of construction, destruction, and reconstruction. The hexagons may be the ideal shape for the job, but when the bees are forced to adapt, the hive becomes a testament to the power of change. And as humans, we too must embrace change as part of our own growth. So as you rest here, letting your mind wander to this bustling hive of activity, ask yourself, when was the last time you adapted to a challenge in your life? How did you adjust your approach when things didn't go according to plan? Did you return to a perfect solution, or did you embrace a more flexible, resilient mindset? Perhaps there's a lesson in the hive for all of us, that no matter how intricate our plans or designs, we must always be ready to make adjustments, to rebuild, and to grow stronger from the challenges we face. Even the bees, with their seemingly flawless geometry, are not immune to imperfection. But perhaps, in their little mistakes, they remind us that it's okay not to be perfect all the time. The key is in the ability to recover, to adapt, and to continue building something greater piece by piece, no matter the setbacks along the way. Now let's zoom back in and focus on something fascinating: the life cycle of a bee, and how this connects to the way they build their perfect hives. As we've already seen, bees are master builders, but their journey doesn't start with geometric perfection. Instead, it begins in the darkness of the hive, where the first cells are constructed to nurture new life baby bees. What's remarkable is that the very cells in which bees are born are the same ones that will one day store the honey that sustains the colony. It's a cycle of life, death, and rebirth, all within the same walls. The first step in a bee's life cycle is the egg. Queen bees lay thousands of eggs throughout their lifetime, and each egg is placed carefully into a wax cell. As you imagine this, think of the way a mother might cradle her newborn child in her arms, tenderly placing it into a bed she has made just for it. For bees, these cells are far more than just a place to store honey. They're a sanctuary for the next generation of the hive. As the egg hatches, a tiny larva emerges, wriggling around in its small waxen cell. The workers feed it a special diet, and over the course of a few days, the larva grows rapidly. Now think of the cell as a tiny nursery, a place of transformation where the larva will change into a pupa and then eventually into a fully developed bee. The hexagonal design of the honeycomb plays an important role here, as the close-fitting cells allow for efficient use of space while still providing room for the developing bee. It's a tight fit, but it's perfect. The geometry of the cells provides an environment that keeps the growing bee safe, warm, and protected. At this stage, there's something almost poetic about the way the hive is laid out. Each cell, meticulously constructed, serves not just as a home for the adult bee, but also as a cradle for its younger developing form. You might find yourself thinking, is there a hidden message in this? Is the geometry of the hive not just a practical solution, but a reflection of the cycles of life itself? After all, every hexagon in the hive is a building block not just of honeycomb, but of life itself. Once the larva has matured, it enters a resting phase known as pupation. During this time, the wax cells are sealed tightly by worker bees, and the transformation from larva to adult bee begins. The worker bees ensure that the temperature, humidity, and overall environment are just right for this delicate transition. It's almost like a quiet cocoon, where the young bee is shielded from the outside world, safe and sound in its geometric cell. When the time is right, the adult bee emerges from its cell, fully formed and ready to begin its own role in the hive. The way bees take care of their brood is a testament to the importance of the hive structure. Without the careful construction of each cell, and without the precise geometry of the honeycomb, the hive couldn't function as it does. The larvae need their environment to be just right. Too much space, and they might get cold. Too little space, and they might be cramped and stressed. But the hexagonal cells are perfectly sized, providing enough room for growth while keeping the developing bee at the ideal temperature and humidity. Now think about how this natural process mirrors the way we care for the younger generations in our own lives. When we build our own hives, whether that be our families, communities, or even our personal goals, we're often trying to create a space that will nurture growth, protect what's fragile, and provide the right conditions for transformation. The bees, in their instinctual wisdom, are able to create this space for their young without needing to think about it the way we might. They don't measure or plan, they simply act based on what they know is needed. In your own life, you might think about the spaces that you create, whether they're physical, emotional, or mental, and ask yourself, are these spaces as conducive to growth and transformation as they could be? The bees offer us a powerful reminder that the spaces we create around us matter. A cell, a home, or a community, all are environments that shape and nurture life. And just as the bees instinctively build the perfect structure for their young, we too must pay attention to the environments we cultivate, ensuring that they offer protection, stability, and warmth. But life in the hive doesn't just revolve around reproduction. Worker bees, who are the backbone of the hive, are the ones that build, gather nectar, and tend to the queen. And what's remarkable is that despite having different roles, every bee in the colony works with the same purpose: survival. Each bee is driven by the same instinct, the need to protect and ensure the longevity of the hive. There's no hierarchy of importance in the hive. Each bee plays a part in the larger system, and all are equally vital to the success of the colony. It's a beautiful system, one where every action, every decision is made in service of the whole. This creates a perfect balance within the hive, where the needs of the queen, the workers, and the brood are all met in harmony. But even in this seemingly perfect system, there are challenges. Worker bees will sometimes face danger when predators approach the hive or when the environment becomes too harsh. But despite these challenges, they persevere just as they've done for millions of years. As you think about the structure of the hive, you might start to wonder, how do the bees know what's best for the colony? They don't have complex communication like humans, nor do they possess advanced problem-solving skills. Instead, the hive functions as a single organism, with each bee contributing to the whole in ways that we can only begin to understand. The bees trust the system, whether that be the geometry of the cells, the rhythm of the seasons, or the cooperation of the hive. And this trust is what sustains the colony. At the end of the day, the hive is more than just a collection of hexagonal cells and busy bees. It's a symbol of life's delicate balance. The hive's geometry reflects the cycles of birth and death, growth and decay, as well as the power of cooperation and instinct. Each bee's task is simple, but when taken together, they create something far greater than the sum of their individual efforts. Now that we've seen how the life cycle of the bees revolves around their geometrically perfect hive, let's shift our focus to something a little more tangible. How exactly do the bees construct this masterpiece of engineering in the first place? Sure, we know they use instinct, but it's easy to imagine that there's something more subtle and yet profoundly sophisticated happening beneath the surface. It's not just about their genetic wiring or collective intelligence. It's about the dance between the bees' biology, the environment, and the tools they use. Picture yourself as a tiny bee, your wings gently vibrating as you hover near the entrance of the hive. You step into the dark warmth of the hive, and immediately, the hum of activity surrounds you. Worker bees rush past you, busy with their tasks. Some gather nectar. Others prepare food for the queen, while a few are busily constructing wax cells. You, however, are one of the most important members of this intricate system. Your task to build. Building isn't just about making a shape. It's about creating something that can withstand time weather and countless other factors. The bees do this with an extraordinary material, beeswax. This wax is secreted by special glands located on their abdomen and is used to build the honeycomb structure. But before you start imagining a simple substance like glue or mud, let's take a moment to appreciate the complexity of beeswax itself. It's no ordinary material. It's one of nature's most perfectly engineered substances. Beeswax is a bit like a soft natural plastic made up of a combination of fatty acids, esters, and hydrocarbons. It starts out as tiny translucent flakes that are produced by the worker bees when they are around 1 week old. The bees chew these wax flakes with their mandibles, mixing them with saliva and shaping them into soft, malleable wax. When the wax hardens, it becomes an incredibly strong substance, able to support the weight of honey pollen and even the bees themselves. As you imagine the process, it's hard not to marvel at how, with just their bodies and a few specialized glands, the bees are able to produce such a strong and versatile material. They have to chew and mold it into perfect hexagons, one cell at a time, with remarkable precision. The whole process is labor-intensive, but it's also mesmerizingly efficient. In fact, it's been estimated that a single worker bee can produce only about 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in its lifetime, yet that same bee will contribute to the construction of the entire hive, from its delicate walls to the intricate hexagonal cells. But how do the bees know to create hexagons? And how do they ensure that their wax cells are perfectly aligned? To answer these questions, we need to look at the physics of the hive construction. A bee's natural instinct guides it towards symmetry, but it's also their perception of the world around them that informs their work. Bees rely on their sense of touch, sight, and even the vibrations in the air to guide their wax-building process. When they deposit the wax, it begins as a small blob, but as the wax cools and hardens, the bees apply just the right amount of pressure to mold it into a perfect hexagonal shape. This phenomenon of self-organization is truly remarkable. Without any need for a teacher or supervisor, the bees intuitively create cells that are perfectly sized and shaped for their purpose. As the workers place wax, the surrounding cells influence the shape of the next one. The cells expand and adjust to fit together like a giant puzzle. They don't need any advanced knowledge of geometry, and yet somehow the hexagonal shape emerges naturally. This is where the magic happens. The bees' physical behavior, whether it's the pressure they apply to the wax, the way they manipulate it, or the temperature of the hive, determines the precise shape and angle of each hexagonal cell. The beauty of this is that the bees aren't consciously thinking about it. They don't have to. Their natural processes and instincts, coupled with the way the wax behaves in response to these actions, lead to the perfect outcome. The collective action of hundreds or thousands of bees, all working in harmony, results in a structure that seems almost inevitable. If you think about this process, it feels almost as though the bees are participating in an ancient natural symphony. Each bee plays its part, and through their combined efforts, the honeycomb takes form. What's remarkable is that no bee is individually responsible for an entire section. Instead, each contributes to the whole building one tiny piece at a time. This collective effort is what makes the hive such an efficient and successful structure. Each individual bee's actions may seem small on their own, but together they create something that can withstand the passage of time, harsh weather, and predators. As you reflect on this process, you might wonder, how do we as humans build our own systems? When you think about your life, whether it's your career, your relationships, or your personal goals, how much of it is about the collective effort? You may be a solitary worker at times, but ultimately we're all part of a larger system, just like the bees. Perhaps the hive offers us a model for building our own success, not just through individual effort, but through cooperation and contribution to the collective whole. The bees show us that building doesn't have to be about perfection. It's about gradual, persistent effort. Just as bees don't rush their work, we too can learn to take our time. The honeycomb is built one small cell at a time, and so is our journey through life. It's a reminder that even though the end result may seem far off, each step we take brings us closer to our own ideal hive. And just as bees don't rush their building, we don't need to rush our progress. Like the bees, we're all contributing to a larger, beautiful design, whether we can see it or not. Now that we've delved into the bees' remarkable construction process, let's step back for a moment and consider something almost philosophical. Why is geometry, particularly the hexagon, so important to the bees? It's not just that the shape is useful, or that it's a happy accident of nature. No, there's something deeper at work here. The hexagon isn't just an efficient way to build, it's a symbol of balance, harmony, and the wisdom of nature's design. Picture the hive in your mind, a vast network of waxen hexagons, their sides gently touching each other, perfectly fitted together. Every time a worker bee places a new piece of wax in a cell, it seamlessly connects with the others, creating a structure that looks like a perfectly ordered universe, a microcosm of efficiency. But what makes the hexagon the chosen shape? Why not squares, triangles, or even circles? After all, each of those shapes might be simpler in some way. The truth is, the hexagon is the most efficient use of space and resources in nature. Imagine you were tasked with building the most compact, durable structure possible. You could use squares, but they waste space at the corners. Triangles are sturdy, but they aren't the most efficient when it comes to fitting together without leaving gaps. The circle is pleasing to the eye, but it's not as space-efficient as the hexagon. The hexagon, on the other hand, uses every bit of space without any gaps, creating a perfect tessellation that allows each cell to fit perfectly within the hive. This tessellation means that the bees can maximize every inch of space available, packing in as many cells as possible and allowing them to store more honey pollen and brood. But there's more to it than that. The hexagon isn't just efficient in terms of space, it's also incredibly strong. Each side of a hexagonal cell provides support for the other sides, creating a structure that is durable yet lightweight. This is why honeycombs are so stable even when packed with honey and the weight of thousands of bees. If the bees had chosen another shape, say a square or a triangle, the cells would be less stable and the overall structure of the hive would be much more fragile. The hexagon, by contrast, has a geometric strength that ensures the hive can withstand external pressures, whether from the weight of honey, the movements of the bees, or even the occasional predator attempting to break into the hive. This efficiency and strength aren't just random advantages, they're products of the very principles of geometry. The bees are not only working with their instincts, but also in a way they're tapping into the deep patterns of nature itself. The hexagon, found in everything from snowflakes to crystal formations, is a shape that appears when the forces of nature work in harmony, when balance is achieved. It's a perfect manifestation of nature's understanding of balance, where every piece fits, where every part supports the other, and where resources are used in the most efficient way possible. It's as though the bees are acting in sync with the universe, tapping into a deep mathematical truth that governs the world around them. When you think about it, there's something beautifully humbling about this. The bees don't need to study geometry. They don't need to understand Pythagoras' theorem or read about the golden ratio. They don't even need to be conscious of the beauty of the hexagon. And yet they instinctively build these perfectly efficient structures as if they've inherited the secrets of geometry from the very fabric of nature itself. Their ability to create something so harmonious and precise is a reminder that wisdom doesn't always come from intellect. It can come from living in tune with the world around us. It's tempting to think that this perfection is a result of a long evolutionary process. But consider this: the first bees must have built their hives without understanding why the hexagon was the most efficient shape. The process evolved over time, no doubt, but it was the cumulative wisdom of countless generations of bees acting on instinct that led to this remarkable outcome. In this way, the bees' success is a testament to the power of natural selection, not just in creating individual survival, but in designing something far greater than the sum of its parts. As you reflect on this, you might start to think about your own geometry of life. Just as the bees instinctively build a perfect hive, we too have our own natural tendencies that guide us. We are drawn toward balance, order, and efficiency, even if we don't always know why. There's a rhythm to life, a flow that guides us toward harmony, and sometimes, just like the bees, we find ourselves unknowingly working toward the most efficient solution. Think about the systems you've created in your own life. Whether it's your daily routines, your work habits, or the relationships you nurture, you might find that there's a hidden geometry to it all. Like the bees, we may be drawn to structures that help us thrive, even if we don't fully understand why. The key, however, lies in recognizing that we too can tap into the natural flow of life, just as the bees do. And so, as you drift deeper into the sounds of the bees working tirelessly on their honeycombs, consider the possibility that life itself is an intricate design. You might not be building hexagons in the same way, but you're still constructing your own patterns, your own spaces, your own hive. And if you listen closely to the hum of your own life, you might start to hear the same rhythm, the same flow of natural design guiding your every step. By now, we've seen that the bees' mastery of geometry isn't just a fluke, it's an inherent part of their design, deeply embedded within their very nature. But let's pause and think about how all this perfection comes together. There's an intriguing question that remains unanswered in our exploration so far. How do the bees know when to stop? How do they instinctively know when the hive is complete? This might seem like a simple question, but it's key to understanding the intelligence of these little creatures, which doesn't always rely on the same kind of thinking that we humans use. In fact, the bee's ability to measure the right amount of space is a remarkable example of how they navigate their world. If you were a bee, building the hive would be a process driven more by instinct than conscious thought. Yet the bees seem to know exactly when the hive has reached its ideal size. It's not simply a matter of stopping when they feel like it, nor do they follow a fixed rule. Instead, it's a dynamic process influenced by a number of factors, such as the needs of the colony, the availability of food, the queen's egg-laying patterns, and importantly, the signals given off by the hive itself. One of the key ways the bees know when to stop is through a fascinating system of communication called trophallaxis. This term refers to the process by which bees exchange food and information directly from mouth to mouth. It's a kind of social transmission where bees share not just nutrients, but also messages about the health and status of the hive. When the hive reaches a certain level of fullness, bees will begin to share different types of pheromones, chemical signals that tell the colony that they've reached a threshold. This chemical feedback loops back into the hive's construction process, signaling that it's time to stop building and start focusing on other tasks like gathering nectar or caring for the brood. As you imagine this system of communication, consider the way a beehive operates as one unified organism. The hive itself is an intricate living entity made up of thousands of individual parts working together in harmony. Each bee's actions are influenced not just by its immediate surroundings, but by the needs and status of the entire colony. It's a kind of hive mind where no single bee dictates the course of action, but instead, the colony as a whole responds to the subtle cues and signals it receives. The hive's overall condition, from the queen's egg-laying patterns to the available nectar stores, drives the construction process. What's remarkable about this system is the way it parallels the way we humans communicate and make decisions in groups. Much like the bees, we often rely on subtle signals and feedback loops to determine our course of action. Whether it's in the workplace, at home, or within our communities, we constantly send out and receive signals from each other, both verbal and nonverbal, that guide our decisions. And just like the bees, we may not always be consciously aware of how these signals are shaping our behavior, but they certainly are. In fact, you might even start to realize that the bee's hive, in a way, acts like a mirror to the collective dynamics of human society. Consider the many ways in which we work together, often without fully understanding why certain actions feel right or when the moment has arrived to shift our focus. In the same way that the bees know when it's time to stop building and move on to another task, we too have moments in our lives when we feel a shift, a subtle pull that tells us it's time to move forward, to grow, or to rest. This quiet, almost instinctual knowledge is often what drives us through life's various stages, and yet the bee's ability to stop building doesn't mean they've reached a state of stasis. Once the hive has reached its optimal size, the colony's work continues. In fact, this is where the bee's true brilliance lies. The hive is a dynamic living structure that is constantly being modified and updated. It's not a static thing. It evolves over time as the bees respond to new challenges and environmental changes. Imagine then that every cell in the hive is constantly under construction, in some way, even as others are completed. New cells are built as needed, while old ones might be renovated or reused for new purposes. The bees also continuously add more wax to the edges of the honeycomb, reinforcing the structure and ensuring that it remains strong enough to hold the weight of the hive's growing population. They are always adapting constantly, in tune with the needs of the colony, which is why hives can withstand the test of time. This ever-changing nature of the hive gives us another interesting lesson in cooperation and adaptability. It's easy to think of a hive as a completed structure, but in reality, it's always in motion, always shifting, always being maintained. The same can be said of any long-term project or community. Whether you're building a career, a family, or a personal goal, nothing is ever truly finished. There's always a need for maintenance, adaptation, and growth. The hive isn't a finished product, it's a constantly evolving masterpiece. Now imagine a hive that's been built with the perfect geometry, filled with wax cells, each serving a specific purpose. And then imagine the bees working tirelessly day in and day out to maintain that perfection. Just as we work on our own creations, whether it's a relationship, a project, or even our own personal development, there's always a little bit of rebuilding, tweaking, and nurturing required. Just as the bees adapt to their surroundings, we too must remain flexible and open to change as we continue our own journey. As the bees finish constructing the perfect hive, they begin to fill it with what they need to survive: honey, pollen, and brood. But there's one last important detail: the way the bees store their honey. They don't just dump the honey into the cells. They also use their bodies to regulate temperature and humidity, ensuring that the honey is stored in the ideal conditions. This final step in the creation of the hive is the bees' way of protecting the fruits of their labor, ensuring that everything will be preserved for the long term. In a sense, the bees have created not just a place to live, but a living space, one that is constantly being tended to, shaped, and adapted to meet the needs of the colony. It's a perfect balance of structure and flexibility, a dynamic system that allows the bees to thrive in harmony with their environment. It's a lesson in resilience and the quiet power of incremental effort. As we reach deeper into the structure and purpose of the hive, something truly fascinating begins to emerge. The way bees build and maintain their hives isn't just an example of incredible geometry and construction. It also holds a crucial insight into the survival of the colony itself. In the wild, survival is never guaranteed, but the bees' remarkable ability to adapt and optimize their environment is what allows them to thrive even under the most difficult circumstances. And much of this success is tied directly to the most valuable resource within their hive: honey. Honey isn't just food for the bees, it's a living, breathing testament to their survival strategy. Imagine yourself as one of those worker bees, freshly emerged from the wax and ready to contribute. You spend your days flitting from flower to flower, collecting nectar and bringing it back to the hive. But you don't just deposit it in any old cell. Oh no, you've got a specific job to do. You're tasked with creating something far more precious than just any nectar. You're turning that nectar into honey. This conversion is one of nature's most extraordinary processes. You begin by regurgitating the nectar into the mouths of your hive mates, who chew it for a while to break down the sugars. This process is called enzymatic digestion. While this may sound a little gross, it's actually brilliant. The enzymes in the bee's saliva break down the complex sugars into simpler forms, turning nectar into a substance that's thicker and more concentrated. The bees then deposit the nectar into the honeycomb cells. But they don't just leave it there. No, the real magic happens when they use their wings to fan the nectar, evaporating excess moisture until the nectar reaches just the right consistency. This is where the bees' attention to detail comes into play. They use their wings to circulate the air in the hive, cooling it down and reducing the moisture content of the nectar. By the time it's ready, the nectar has been transformed into a dense, sugary substance that's perfect for storage and long-term consumption. It's in this stage that the hive starts to look a little more like what we think of when we imagine a beehive, a series of shiny, golden hexagonal cells filled with honey. But the purpose of this honey isn't just to sustain the bees during their busy lives. No, the honey is the lifeline of the entire colony, especially when the colder months arrive. The bees don't just make honey for the present moment, they make it to ensure their survival in the future. When winter comes, flowers wither, and nectar becomes scarce. But the bees don't panic. They have already stored up enough honey to sustain them through the lean months. That's the genius of the hive. It's a forward-thinking system, an ecosystem designed not just for the present, but for the future as well. Think about this for a moment. These bees working together to build, maintain, and protect the hive are setting themselves up for success months in advance. The honey they create today will nourish them in times when they're unable to leave the hive to gather new resources. It's an investment in the future, one that takes foresight, collaboration, and hard work. This concept of preparing for the future is incredibly relevant to our own lives. Just as bees spend their time collecting and storing honey, for the winter we too need to plan for the future, whether it's saving money, planning our careers, or simply ensuring that we are mentally and physically prepared for what comes next. There's something to be said for taking the time to store honey for the leaner times ahead. In fact, you might begin to notice how similar our own survival strategies are to the bees. Consider how you gather knowledge and experience throughout your life, building your own personal reserve to draw on when challenges arise. These stores may not be physical, like honey in a hive, but they're still crucial to our success and happiness. Just as the bees' honey provides them with the energy to sustain themselves during lean periods, your own personal reserves can sustain you when life's seasons change. You might even start to think about the times in your own life when you've worked hard to build up something, whether it's a skill, a relationship, or a safety net, only to realize later that it was exactly what you needed in moments of uncertainty. There's another lesson to be learned here too. The bees don't hoard their honey. While they store it in individual cells for their own use, they also share it with one another. There's no selfishness in the hive. The honey is stored collectively, and every bee from the queen to the workers gets its share. In a sense, the honey is a community resource, and this sense of shared responsibility within the hive is one of the reasons why bees are able to thrive despite the dangers and challenges they face. Perhaps there's something to be said about the way we build our own hives in life. In many ways, we too create reserves for ourselves, resources that we share with the people around us. Whether it's love, support, knowledge, or material wealth, there's a quiet beauty in knowing that the effort we put into our own development can in turn help others. Just like the bees, our success isn't just about what we gather for ourselves. It's about what we contribute to the larger community. It's this generosity, this willingness to share and collaborate that allows both bees and humans to survive and thrive. So as you reflect on the honey in the hive, think about the ways you're creating your own reserves. What are you storing up for the future? And how can you share what you have with others, just as the bees do? As we continue to explore the inner workings of a bee colony, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The success of the hive isn't just about individual bees working alone. It's about collaboration, shared responsibility, and an unspoken harmony that ties the whole colony together. Bees communicate with each other in ways that are almost magical, through vibrations, pheromones, and gestures. But what happens when a threat arrives? How do the bees protect the hive from danger, especially when the colony is under siege by predators or the environment is no longer favorable? A bee colony isn't just a place for honey storage or brood care. It's a fortress, a sanctuary, and a tight-knit society that must protect itself against the outside world. This leads us to an extraordinary phenomenon, the defensive behavior of the bees. Bees are fiercely protective of their hive and will defend it at all costs, even at the expense of their own lives. But their defense strategies are far more complex than simply attacking intruders. Their approach is rooted in the same sense of geometry and efficiency that guides their hive construction. When a threat approaches the hive, be it a bear trying to break in or a hornet trying to steal their brood, the bees respond in unison. It starts with the scout bees. These workers leave the hive to assess the danger-gathering information on the intruder. They don't just rush in blindly. Instead, they use their sharp senses to identify the threat and then signal back to the hive. The moment a scout bee detects danger, it returns to the colony and communicates the threat to the others using a very specific type of vibration. The dance of the scout bee is more than just a cute little wiggle. It's a message, a warning that sets the entire hive in motion. Once the danger is confirmed, the colony quickly shifts into high gear. Worker bees swarm the intruder, creating a physical barrier around the hive. They use their bodies to block access, their sheer numbers acting as a defense mechanism. The bees don't need to deliberate or communicate with words. Their collective intelligence, their hive mind takes over. Each bee knows its role and instinctively understands what to do. But there's something fascinating about this swarm behavior. The bees don't just use their bodies for physical defense. They also use their stingers, tens of thousands of them, each one designed to deliver a potent venom. A single bee may not pose much of a threat to a human, but when the entire colony joins forces, their defensive capabilities become formidable. As the bees cluster around the intruder, they don't just sting once. They continue to sting until the threat is driven away or neutralized. But what's truly remarkable is how the bees understand the limits of their defense. They don't waste their energy on needless aggression. They only strike when absolutely necessary. This is another testament to their efficiency. The bees will not attack unless they know it's vital for the hive's survival. Think about that for a moment. The bees don't fight for sport, and they don't act out of rage or fear. Their actions are driven by instinct and purpose, honed over millions of years of evolution. Each sting, each move is calculated, performed with precision, and in service of the hive. This is a beautiful reminder of the power of intention, of the wisdom that can come from working toward a shared goal. Imagine if we too could approach our own challenges with such calmness, efficiency, and focus, acting only when necessary, and always in the service of something greater than ourselves. Interestingly, bee colonies also exhibit another layer of defense, their ability to adapt to external changes. If the environment shifts, for example, if a new predator arrives, or the climate changes, the bees will adjust their behavior to protect their home. They are remarkably resilient, able to reconfigure their strategies based on what they observe. This adaptability is one of the core reasons why bees have survived through countless generations, outlasting predators and environmental changes alike. It's tempting to think of bees as rigid, unchanging creatures stuck in their ways. But in reality, they're incredibly adaptable, constantly evolving to meet new challenges. The hive is a system that responds not only to the physical needs of the colony, but also to the changing world around it. As you think about this, consider how we as humans also adapt in the face of adversity. Whether it's adjusting to new technology, shifting societal norms, or personal challenges, we too have the capacity to evolve and respond to the world around us. As you imagine the hive on high alert, buzzing with the vibrations of warning and the energy of thousands of bees preparing for battle, you might start to think about your own ability to defend what you hold dear. What in your life are you willing to protect with that same level of dedication? What parts of your life are you constantly safeguarding, from emotional well-being to physical security? And yet there's an important distinction between the way bees defend and the way humans often respond to threats. While bees act in harmony with their collective goal, we often find ourselves acting out of fear or insecurity, jumping to conclusions or misdirecting our energies. Perhaps like the bees, we can learn to respond more efficiently, focusing our energy only when absolutely necessary, and always with the goal of protecting our greater well-being. In the end, the bees' defense strategies aren't just about protection, they're about survival. They understand that in order to thrive, they must work together, adapting to change and defending what is vital. Whether it's a predator, a change in the weather, or a shift in the balance of the colony, the bees are ready to protect their home. And as you consider their actions, you might find that your own instincts for survival and protection can benefit from a similar calm collective approach. At this point, we've come to understand that bees aren't just experts in geometry and teamwork, they're also brilliant survivalists. Every aspect of their behavior, from hive construction to defense strategies, is driven by the need to ensure the survival of the colony. But what happens when everything goes well? What does a thriving, successful hive look like? And perhaps more importantly, what is the secret to the bees' long-term success? To answer these questions, we need to take a closer look at the hive's incredible ability to self-regulate and maintain balance. One of the most fascinating aspects of bee behavior is the way they maintain homeostasis, a perfect, balanced environment that allows the hive to flourish. It's as though the bees have mastered the art of equilibrium, a subtle dance between various forces that keep their world in perfect harmony. This process isn't just about finding balance in a physical sense, though it's certainly a big part of it. The bees also maintain balance in terms of energy resources and social order. Take, for example, the regulation of temperature inside the hive. Bees are incredibly sensitive to temperature changes, and they've evolved some ingenious ways to keep their home at a constant temperature, no matter what the weather is like outside. During cold weather, when the outside world may dip below, freezing, the bees form a cluster, a tightly packed ball of bees around the queen, keeping her warm and cozy in the center. The bees take turns moving in and out of the cluster, ensuring that the heat is distributed evenly throughout the colony. This process helps maintain a steady internal temperature, allowing the bees to survive even in the harshest winter conditions. But this isn't a one-way street. The temperature isn't just regulated for warmth. It's also adjusted to keep the honeycomb cells at the perfect temperature for brood development. If the temperature drops too low, the eggs and larvae could freeze, or worse, become susceptible to diseases. The bees, however, can control the microclimate within the hive, adjusting their body heat, fanning their wings, or clustering together to maintain a constant ideal temperature. Similarly, bees regulate the humidity inside the hive, controlling how much moisture is in the air. This is crucial for several reasons, not least of which is the drying and storage of honey. If the humidity levels rise too high, the honey may not properly dehydrate, leading to mold growth and rot. To prevent this, the bees use their fanning behavior again to circulate the air inside the hive, evaporating excess moisture and ensuring that the honey remains perfectly preserved. Think about that for a moment. These tiny creatures are not only building the perfect geometric structure, but are also continuously tweaking and adjusting the conditions inside the hive to ensure everything runs smoothly. It's a never-ending cycle of maintenance, fine-tuning, and adaptation. The hive, in essence, is never static. It's a living, breathing organism that requires constant care and attention. Yet, it is also a self-sustaining ecosystem where each bee plays its part in ensuring the survival of the whole. This idea of self-regulation and balance might sound familiar to you. Think about the ways in which we too try to maintain balance in our lives. We regulate our emotions, our schedules, our relationships, and our physical health in an attempt to keep ourselves centered and well. But unlike the bees, we don't always have the same level of intuitive collective guidance. For the bees, maintaining this equilibrium is a shared responsibility, one that doesn't rely on any one individual, but rather on the collective wisdom of the colony. Each bee knows its role and understands the needs of the hive, ensuring that everything functions as it should. What's perhaps most remarkable about the bee's self-regulation is that it goes beyond simple instinct. There's a deeper level of intelligence at play, one that is based on centuries of evolution and finely tuned over countless generations. It's a system that's learned to anticipate future needs, to adapt to shifting environments, and to respond to subtle changes in the ecosystem. It's a reminder that survival isn't just about reacting to the present moment, but about anticipating what comes next and being prepared for it. And when you think about it, don't we all try to do the same thing? Whether it's maintaining a routine, staying ahead of challenges, or balancing work and rest, we too are constantly trying to create a sense of equilibrium in our own lives. Just as the bees regulate their hive's temperature, humidity, and structure, we too manage the many aspects of our own lives, striving for that delicate balance between personal, professional, and social needs. The bees, in their infinite wisdom, show us that balance isn't something that happens by accident. It requires constant attention, adaptation, and care. And like the bees, we too have the capacity to find balance in our own lives if we're willing to put in the work. But there's another layer to this idea of self-regulation, something more subtle and equally important. The bees don't just adjust their environment for the sake of survival. They do so to foster the growth and well-being of future generations. The delicate balance they maintain within the hive ensures that not only the current population thrives, but also that new generations of bees will be born, raised, and nurtured in an environment that will allow them to grow into healthy, productive workers. This is one of the reasons why the bees system is so brilliant. It's designed for sustainability, for the long-term health of the colony, rather than just short-term success. This concept of sustainability is a lesson for us all. In our own lives, we often focus on immediate results or quick fixes. But like the bees, we must think about the long term, about the health and well-being of our future selves and the legacy we leave behind. Whether it's investing in our health, nurturing relationships, or building a sustainable career, we too must find ways to create systems that are not just about surviving today, but about thriving in the years to come. So as you reflect on the bees' ability to regulate their environment and their own internal balance, think about how you're doing the same in your own life. What can you do to create more harmony in your world, to ensure that both you and those around you can flourish for the long term? And like the bees, how can you shift your focus from short-term gains to long-term sustainability? Now we've explored how bees create the perfect geometric structure, how they defend their hive with unwavering dedication, and how they maintain balance within the colony. But there's yet another layer to this incredible story, one that speaks to the deeper mysteries of nature, the way in which the bee's behavior mirrors the natural cycles and rhythms that govern all life on Earth. One of the most striking aspects of a bee colony's behavior is its connection to the world around it. The bees are not isolated creatures living in a bubble. Their lives are intricately linked to the changing seasons, the blooming flowers, and the rhythms of the environment. From the moment they begin their foraging trips, they are part of a larger cycle that spans the entire ecosystem. Consider the changing seasons, for example. In spring and summer, when flowers bloom and nectar is abundant, the bees are in full swing. They are busy gathering resources, building the hive, and preparing for the future. But when autumn arrives and the flowers fade, The bees shift gears. They don't panic or try to gather every last drop of nectar. Instead, they focus on preserving their stores and preparing for the long winter months. This seasonal shift from abundance to scarcity, from activity to rest, mirrors the natural cycles that govern all life forms. The bees live in harmony with the world around them, adapting to the rhythms of the environment. This is no mere coincidence. It's a reflection of the deep connection between all living beings and the ecosystems they inhabit. The bees, in their infinite wisdom, understand that life is cyclical, that there are times of plenty and times of scarcity, times of growth and times of rest. The way bees live in sync with the seasons is a reminder of the importance of flow. Life is never static. It's a constant ebb and flow between activity and rest, creation and destruction, abundance and scarcity. And yet, in this constant shift, there's an underlying harmony, a rhythm that guides us all if we're willing to listen. As you reflect on the bee's ability to adapt to the changing seasons, you might begin to notice how this pattern plays out in your own life. Do you, like the bees, find yourself moving through different phases of activity and rest? Are there times when you feel full of energy, gathering the resources you need for the future? And other times when you must pull back, rest, and preserve your energy for what lies ahead? The bees offer us a valuable lesson in recognizing these rhythms and aligning ourselves with them. Just as the bees don't fight against the changing seasons, but instead work with them, we too must learn to work with the natural flow of life. This doesn't mean passivity or resignation. Rather, it means acknowledging that life isn't always in our control, and sometimes the best way to thrive is to move with the current rather than against it. Think about the way you approach periods of productivity versus periods of rest. How often do you push yourself to keep going, even when your body or mind is telling you to slow down? What would happen if you allowed yourself to rest more, knowing that it is a crucial part of your personal cycle? The bees teach us that growth, survival, and success aren't just about relentless action. They're about finding balance and aligning ourselves with the natural world's rhythms. Rest is as much a part of the cycle as work. Perhaps you've already noticed this in your own life, the times when you felt overwhelmed and burned out, and the moments when you've taken a step back to rest and recharge. When you've allowed yourself to slow down, you've come back stronger and more capable of facing what lies ahead. This ebb and flow between effort and rest is a pattern that underlies not just the bees' lives, but our own. The secret, it seems, is in recognizing these cycles and honoring them. But there's another deeper connection here, one that's even more profound. The bees' connection to the natural cycles doesn't stop with the seasons. It extends to the plants and flowers they rely on for their sustenance. Every foraging trip they make is an act of collaboration with the plants they visit. When a bee collects nectar from a flower, it doesn't just take, it gives in return. In the process of gathering nectar, the bee also pollinates the flower, helping it to reproduce and continue its own cycle of life. This mutual relationship between bees and flowers is a beautiful example of interdependence. The bees rely on the flowers for nectar, and the flowers rely on the bees for pollination. This relationship is one of the foundational pillars of life on Earth. Without bees, many plants would fail to reproduce, disrupting the balance of the ecosystem. And without plants, bees would have no food, no resources to sustain the hive. This delicate balance between species is what keeps ecosystems functioning and thriving. As you think about this interdependence, it might make you reflect on your own relationships. How often do you rely on others for support, sustenance, or guidance? And how often do you give back, offering help or nurturing those who help you? Just as the bees and flowers are locked in a dance of mutual benefit, We too are constantly interacting with others in ways that are both giving and receiving. Life is not just about what we take, it's also about what we give, and the bees remind us of this delicate balance every time they visit a flower. In the grand scheme of things, the bees are more than just tiny creatures buzzing from flower to flower. They are key players in the intricate web of life that sustains our planet. They are part of a larger interconnected system that relies on balanced cooperation and mutual benefit. And in the same way, we too are part of that web, contributing to the balance and health of the world around us. So as you consider the bees' relationship with the seasons, with the flowers, and with each other, think about your own place in the world. How do you interact with the cycles of your life? How do you contribute to the well-being of those around you? And what can you do to ensure that, like the bees, you continue to work in harmony with the natural flow of life, rather than against it? Now that we've seen how the bees navigate the delicate balance of life through geometry, defense, self-regulation, and their connection with the environment, it's time to step back and reflect on the broader implications of their behavior. We've learned about their efficiency, their teamwork, and their remarkable adaptability. But there's still something truly profound that we haven't fully explored yet: the deeper intelligence of the hive. The hive is not just a structure, it's a living thinking system. And unlike human societies, which rely on individual intelligence, the bee colony operates as a superorganism, a single entity made up of thousands of individuals working together in perfect unison. But what does it mean to have a collective intelligence? How is it that the hive as a whole seems to know what needs to be done without any one bee dictating the actions of the others? At the heart of this collective intelligence is a fascinating concept known as swarm intelligence. It's a form of decentralized problem-solving that emerges from the actions of individual bees interacting with each other. Rather than relying on a central leader or an individual authority, the colony's decisions arise spontaneously from the interactions between its members. When a bee moves, it influences the movement of others, creating a cascade of responses that eventually lead to a coordinated action. This idea of swarm intelligence is part of what makes the bee colony so successful. When the bees need to make a decision, whether it's choosing a new location for the hive or determining how to divide labor, each bee contributes its piece of information. No one bee has all the answers, but by sharing knowledge, by dancing, by releasing pheromones, the bees collectively arrive at a solution. This is something humans often struggle with: how to make group decisions that reflect the needs of the collective rather than the desires of individuals. The bees, however, have mastered this without the need for hierarchy or authority. Think about this in your own life. How often do you feel the weight of making decisions alone or trying to solve a problem on your own? In contrast, consider the power of collaboration. Imagine a world where we relied more on collective intelligence, where solutions emerged from our combined experiences and insights. Just as the bees seem to understand, the power of the collective often leads to better outcomes than the sum of individual efforts. Maybe there's a lesson in their approach about stepping back and trusting that when we come together, we often find solutions we couldn't reach on our own. But there's something else at play here that's worth contemplating: the role of the queen in all this. While the queen doesn't issue direct orders, she plays a key role in maintaining the cohesion of the colony. Her presence stabilizes the social structure, ensuring that the bees remain united in their shared purpose. She lays the eggs that will ensure the future of the hive, and her pheromones help regulate the colony's behavior. But interestingly, even though the queen is vital to the colony's existence, she doesn't dictate the day-to-day activities of the bees. The bees don't follow her because of power. They follow her because her presence keeps them aligned in their mission, which is ultimately to thrive as a community. This non-hierarchical cooperative structure is something we can all take inspiration from. While human society often places value on leadership and top-down decision-making, the bees remind us that true success doesn't always come from control. Instead, it comes from trust, from shared purpose, and from understanding that each individual's contribution matters to the whole. There's also a fascinating connection between the queen's influence and the concept of empathy. Bees, as a collective, seem to have an innate ability to understand and respond to the needs of others. This empathy is not about feeling for each other in the way humans do, but rather about responding in ways that promote the health and success of the colony as a whole. Whether it's a bee adjusting its foraging habits to respond to changes in the environment, or worker bees shifting roles to meet the needs of the brood, there is a sense that each individual bee understands its role in the greater context of the hive. It's an empathy rooted in the survival of the collective, and it's a key factor in the hive's ability to function so seamlessly. Imagine if we too could embrace a form of empathy that was more focused on the greater good rather than just individual desires. What would happen if in our daily lives we looked at the needs of our communities, our families, and our world, and tried to make decisions that reflected the needs of the whole rather than just our own personal interests? The bees show us that when we work with a sense of shared purpose and empathy, the whole system thrives even in the face of challenges. But empathy is just one part of the equation. The other part is adaptability. One of the most powerful aspects of the bee colony's intelligence is its ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Whether it's responding to a sudden threat, adjusting to fluctuations in food supply, or adapting to seasonal changes, the bees have an incredible ability to pivot and evolve as needed. They don't stick rigidly to one plan, nor do they resist change. They embrace it, constantly refining their approach to ensure survival. In our own lives, adaptability can be one of the most challenging qualities to cultivate. It's so easy to fall into rigid patterns of behavior, to resist change, or to try to control the unpredictable. But like the bees, we are part of a larger system, a system that requires flexibility, creativity, and openness to thrive. When we allow ourselves to be adaptable, we open ourselves up to new possibilities and new solutions. We stop clinging to the old ways of doing things and allow the world around us to guide us toward a new direction. In the end, the bees are more than just nature's architects. They are a model for intelligent, collaborative living. They teach us that wisdom doesn't come from control or dominance, but from cooperation, empathy, and adaptability. They show us that the best solutions emerge when we work together, trust in each other's abilities, and remain open to the ever-changing world around us. And just as the bees thrive in their collective intelligence, we too can learn to thrive when we work together, embrace change, and remain focused on the greater good. As we come to the final part of our journey into the intricate world of bees and their perfect geometric hives, it's time to slow down, to reflect, and to consider what we've learned, both about the bees themselves and about how we can integrate their wisdom into our own lives. By now, you may have started to recognize a pattern, an underlying principle running through everything we've explored: balance. Whether it's the bees' ability to find harmony between work and rest, their seamless collaboration in building the hive, or their deep connection to the natural world, balance is the thread that ties everything together. It's a balance between individual action and collective purpose, between structure and flexibility, between effort and rejuvenation. And this balance is not something that can be forced or manufactured. It's something that emerges naturally when all the parts are allowed to work together in harmony. The beauty of the bee colony lies in its ability to maintain this balance without effort. The bees don't consciously think about their need for balance, they just know. Their instincts guide them to work together, to share resources, and to support each other. They don't measure their success by the number of individual bees who gather nectar, but by the health of the colony as a whole. The hive, with its perfect geometry, its constant flux, and its ability to adapt, is a metaphor for life itself. Life is messy, unpredictable, and constantly changing. But when we align ourselves with the natural rhythms and cycles of the world, when we work together with others, and find balance in our actions, we too can create something beautiful and lasting. This final reflection on balance brings us back to the simplicity and wisdom of the bee's existence. It's easy to get lost in the details, the intricate patterns of the honeycomb, the precise angles of the hexagons, or the complexity of the bee's communication. But at the core of all of this is a simple truth. Balance is the key to thriving. Just as the bees don't try to control every aspect of their environment, but adapt to it, we too must learn to surrender control and find peace in the ebb and flow of life. Perhaps now that we've explored the beehive in such depth, you're beginning to see your own life in a new light. Like the bees, you are part of a larger system, a system that thrives when balance is maintained, when cooperation and empathy are at the forefront, and when you trust in the natural flow of things. You don't have to control everything. You don't have to always be in charge. The hive is proof that true wisdom comes from knowing when to act, when to rest, and when to trust in the collective strength of those around you. And as you drift off to sleep tonight, consider the bees dance in the moonlight. Their delicate wings carry them from one flower to the next, from one decision to the next, always guided by instinct, always in harmony with the seasons. They remind us that our own lives too can flow with ease when we trust in our own instincts, when we align ourselves with the cycles of nature, and when we remember that balance is the true foundation of success. So before you close your eyes and rest, think about the hive one last time. Imagine the soft hum of the bees, the rhythmic sound of their wings filling the air, and the quiet, perfect symmetry of the honeycomb. Let that peaceful energy wash over you, calming your mind and soothing your spirit. Just as the bees find peace in the perfect geometry of their hive, so can you find peace in the natural balance of your own life. If you've enjoyed this journey, I'd be quietly grateful if you'd give this video a like or tap that subscribe button for more peaceful explorations with the Sleepy Scientist. It helps more than you might imagine. And before you drift off, I'd still love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. Leave a comment if you're feeling cozy enough to share. It's always a quiet joy to see this sleepy little community ripple across time zones and continents. Good night, sweet dreams.